Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters in Islam. I will be talking inshallah in this video about something which is called the sound intellect and the different ahkam or the different categories of the sound intellect. And inshallah this is going to be a very important video. I ask you to watch it more than one time so that you can grasp all the meanings inshallah. And this is the way Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah they teach this topic, the topic of Aqsam al-Aql or al-Hukm al-Aqli, the categories of the sound intellect. The scholars of Islam have said, and by the way, one of the benefits that inshallah you will be getting after understanding this concept is that you'll be able inshallah after this video and other videos building on what I'm going to say now, you'll be able to inshallah debate non-Muslims. If they debate you, you can answer their questions in a very powerful and convincing and persuading way, and inshallah Allah Ta3ala will bless you by making you the reason for many people to come to Islam and to become Muslims inshallah. So the scholars of Islam, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the true followers of Prophet Muhammad said that there are three different categories upon which the sound intellect or the logic judges. There are three different judgments or three different categories of the sound intellect. One which is called al-Wujub al-Aqli, or might be translated as the necessarily existent. The necessarily existent, meaning that this category, this type of judgment of the sound intellect is things that the sound intellect cannot accept their non-existence, which is Allah Ta3ala. So Allah Ta3ala and all the attributes of Allah, according to the sound intellect, not only the Quran and the hadith of Prophet Muhammad, because definitely in the Quran Allah Ta3ala tells us that He exists and His existence is perfect, and same in the hadith of Prophet Muhammad Sallallaahu Alayhi Wasallam. But here I'm talking the language of logic and sound intellect, which also has been used by the scholars of Islam to convince people to become Muslims. So according to the sound intellect and the logic, the sound intellect does not accept for Allah except to exist. Again, the sound intellect does not accept the non-existence of Allah Ta3ala and His perfect attributes. So Allah exists and His existence is wajibun aqli. Might be translated as necessarily existent. It doesn't mean that Allah needs anything. It means that the existence of Allah is a necessity of the sound intellect to judge and to approve and to recognize. The second category or the second judgment of the sound intellect is impossible things, or impossible things to the sound intellect. And when we say the word impossible, we don't mean difficult or very hard to achieve. We mean absolutely impossible. So impossible to the sound intellect means cannot exist, means that the sound intellect does not accept for those things to exist. Again, when you say that something is impossible to the sound intellect or impossible to the logic, or logically impossible, it means that the sound intellect, the logic, does not accept for this thing to exist. For example, a partner to Allah is impossible. Allah Ta3ala has no partners nor counterpart, and it is impossible to the sound intellect. The sound intellect does not accept for Allah to have a partner. It does not make sense. It's not logical. It does not agree with the sound intellect. It's impossible or impossibility. It's not something which is hard. It's not a measurement of hardness or difficulty. It is impossible to exist. The sound intellect, the logic, does not approve for it to exist. Why? Just for an example, because if there was another God, if there were more than one God, then each one of them would have a separate attribute of will, and because according to the one who says so, if one of them willed for a certain human being to be dead and the other one willed for the same human being to be alive, this will lead to the impossibility or the contradiction of something or someone being alive and dead at the same time, or something being existing or not and not existing at the same time, and this is an illogical impossibility. This is a logical contradiction or illogical impossibility or logical impossibility. So the second category or the second judgment of the sound intellect is the impossible things to the sound intellect, things that the sound intellect does not accept for them to exist, and this is the opposite of the first category. Also, it is impossible and it's against the sound intellect from this second category for Allah to have an end. Allah has no end and Allah has no beginning, and it's impossible that Allah has an end or has a beginning, because this is something which the sound intellect does not accept for to exist. Because if Allah had an end, He would not have been Allah, He would have been a creation. If Allah had a beginning, He would have been a creation. He would have needed someone else to give Him His existence or to create Him, and needing someone else is a sign of weakness and a sign of necessity, and Allah, God, is not weak. When you say God, the definition of God, one of the attributes of God, one of the attributes of Allah, is the one who has no beginning, the one who is perfect, the one who has no end. That's why the human, or that's why the sound intellect does not accept that Allah to have an end or to have a beginning or to have or to be weak or to be like the creations. All those things are impossible to the sound intellect. Not only are mentioned in the Quran as a belief of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah that Allah does not resemble any of His creations and that Allah has no beginning and no end, but also according to the logic and according to the sound intellect, the sound intellect does not accept for the Creator to have a beginning or to have an end or to be weak or to be needing someone else or to resemble any of His creations, because if Allah resembled His creations, He would have been susceptible to the same things and same conditions His creations are susceptible to. And this includes weakness, includes death, includes imperfection. And if He was weak, if He was imperfect, if He was any of those imperfections, then He would not have been Allah, He would not have been God, He would have been a creation like any of the creations. And now we are not talking about Allah, we are talking about creations. But Allah, the Creator, who has no beginning, who has no end, who does not resemble any of His creations, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sound intellect does not accept for Him to be weak or to be imperfect or to have a beginning or end or all of the things we talked about. So this is the second category of the sound intellect, things that the sound intellect does not accept for them to exist. The third category of the sound intellect are the possibilities, the logical possibilities, things that the mind or the things that the mind or the sound intellect can accept for them to exist or can accept for them not to exist. So both possibilities are possible, both situations are possible. For example, all the creations are like that. You and me and the sun and the moon and a certain country, a certain language, a certain person, a certain house, a certain street in a certain city, any of those things which are creations are possibilities, meaning that I or the sound intellect can accept for this world to exist without this specific man or this specific woman or this specific street or this specific language or this specific star or this specific sun or this specific angel or this specific sky. So anything which is created is a possibility. Allah willed for it to exist and Allah created it, and the sound intellect accepts for it either to exist or not to exist. Either to exist or not to exist. So we have in summary, three types of judgments of the sound intellect or the logic. The necessarily existent, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His attributes. The sound intellect does not accept for Allah except to exist. And second category, the impossibilities, things which are impossible to the sound intellect, which is the opposite of the first category, things that the sound intellect does not accept for them to exist in the first place. And the third category are the possibilities, things that the sound intellect accept for them either to exist or not to exist. Inshallah, I'll be talking in more details about this, so I'll talk to you soon again. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fi amanillah.